You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yarnosian, and today I'm joined by this very special host of The Power of Perspective with Stephen Ritchie, Stephen Ritchie himself. Welcome, Stephen.
Glad to be on. Thanks so much for having me on again. It's always a pleasure. And
Yeah, I always value
I'm
our
interested.
conversations both on and off the camera, and you're my fellow podcast buddy, so of course I have to have you on.
Yeah, no, we gotta check in, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
And
The
so the reason I called you, and we talked about this a little bit before the episode we started recording, is that so I was listening to your episode on spinal health, which I'll post. I'll post a link in the description of this video if you're interested in watching. I highly recommend it. Also, highly recommend checking out Stephen's podcast in general. It's a lot of interesting conversations with a lot of unique people and perspectives. But in the spinal health one, I was actually doing yoga at the time as I was listening to it, and I was reflecting on how yoga has been an important part of my journey in improving my spinal health. And not only that, but we kind of bonded over yoga when we first met in Thailand, like what feels like ages ago, but was just like 6 months
yeah,
ago now.
yeah. No, I mean, time flies, hey. No, I mean it was a like point. I think we both have quite an interest in it, and we are in Buddhist countries, and there's quite a you know mindfulness sort of element, I think, and yeah. Well, so I think it's a good one to, I suppose, bond over, and yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I even remember doing I'm trying to remember who it was. It was one of the hotels on the hill. I think it was maybe Laos or
Oh,
where
when we were
I kind of brought up my mats and we were like, you're like, hey, what do you think about this and this? And it was kind of nice just to have someone kind of giving some nice input on a bit of yoga. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah.
distinctly remember seeing the Mekong River Valley on over the balcony as you were like doing yoga on your mat, and you actually traveled all throughout Asia with your yoga mat, which I thought was really impressive. You rarely see people like go travel across the world with their yoga mat. That's a real dedication.
Yeah, I mean, that yoga mat is probably more traveled than a lot of the people I know now. It's gone through all over South Africa, and now it's gone all over, Southeast Asia. Yeah, I mean, the scene is, me with my backpack and this yoga mat and my ergonomic pillow, and just like that. Actually, funny enough, on the mat, I remember when we were on the river in Thailand, when we just gone to those amazing jungle hotel
Mm-hmm.
spots, that hotel that floats on the river there. And so, we come back on the boats, and I actually dropped the yoga mat, I think, and the guy had to catch it before it like fell into the water. So it almost met it almost met a bitter end, but luckily it got to finish its journeys. But I think it was such a good idea because we had such beautiful locations, and also I think it's good to keep up with some of your routines. Like holiday is really cool because you get all this other exposure, but I also think it's good to kind of keep up with the things that kind of you really enjoy, that you bring with you, as well as what you take in as you get to where you're going. And this is one of the things I enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's an important perspective to bring in, that like, yeah, when you're traveling to new places and you're on holiday, it's good to get the novelty, but we also need something to ground us. And our routines that we have in our normal lives are very grounding. And yoga itself
No,
is
no,
very grounding.
no, no, exactly. It's like a a moment to touch base and just, I guess, enjoy a bit of peace, a bit of exercise, kind of in your own space, maybe reflect a bit,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So it's good that you didn't lose your yoga mat to the River Kwai. Just for people listening, it was a very fast river. So if it did like touch the water, or if it did like fall into the water without any security, it was most likely gone. Like this
Yeah, no, I
river
mean this
was,
guy literally had to like lunge and grab it like while it
yeah,
was going off. I'm like, my man.
it was a fast flowing river. So good for him. He knew the importance.
I wonder if I would have dived in after it. So
I mean, seeing
you
how
might have,
like
yeah,
how powerful of a swimmer you were, I would not be surprised if you would try to dive in after it.
yeah. The ultimate adversary in the swimming world is going against that river. We had the most fun activity. I think everyone at the hotel did it like, once or twice or so on. But I was there for ages. Basically, you run up to the top of the hotel to, up the river. You put on your life jacket from the down up, so it's kind of like a nappy, and you jump in the water and you kind of just float down. But then, like as I'm doing that, I try to swim upriver, and I don't know. It was so fun to me. And then at the bottom, you have to catch like this like ladder. Otherwise, you're just gonna go off into the river abyss. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the ladders were colored like red, yellow, green, yellow, red. And you wanted to make sure to grab before the red because the red one was the last ladder, and they would have to go send a a rescue boat after you. But I remember like I was like on shore watching as like, and we were a few of us were watching as Steven was just like swimming his heart out, just and like this was a very fast river, so, but he was able to just, and he was only able to just keep his location. Like just matching the river's speed, which was still really impressive.
Somewhat demotivating. You're at like full sprint, and you look to the side, and you're like exactly where you were. But yeah.
You know, maybe that's a good analogy for life. Sometimes you put in all the effort you can and you realize you haven't really made that much progress, but maybe in taking everything together, maybe you have made a decent amount of progress.
Yeah, to continue that, maybe it's not about the destination, but the progress you make along the way, even if along the way is staying where you are and just reminiscing in the cold
Yeah.
embrace.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a great segue too into yoga, because what a lot of people see in yoga is the destination. You know, you'll see people on Instagram who are doing these crazy back bends, like putting their bodies into knots basically, or like doing these splits and like crazy handstands, and you're like, whoa, that's insane. I don't know if I'll ever get there. So I might not even want to try because it seems like a crazy journey. And for me, like, yeah, I've been practicing yoga for several years now, and I'm not able to do a split or like a crazy back bends, but comparing where I was when I started my journey, I've significantly changed. How have
I
you
think
experienced?
yoga's
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so my experience, I think yoga is like the most for everyone, but but also it's kind of scares people off. But actually, as an activity, it's so accessible to a lot of people. But exactly, it's I think it's very different from the normal sort of day-to-day life. Even people doing things like running to a very different yoga and poses and things. And you often see people most often who are doing it are the enthusiasts who have been doing it for ages, and
Hmm.
so which is why you're probably seeing them a lot. And yeah, they're doing extreme poses as like a progression that they've reached and a way to just kind of push the boundaries and just really add to their enjoyment and a sense of accomplishment. And to a new person, I mean, you got that same journey, day one, you do the very basic poses, but then it's actually like fairly quickly you start trying a little bit of a pose that's a bit more advanced, a bit more spicy, and
We love the spicy
ooh, that's pretty
poses.
wild. Yeah, yeah. Some of them you're like, oh wow, can my arm go there? It's like it's like playing Twister in the air. But the sense of progression I think is very welcoming, and it's just kind of fun. And there's no competition. It's the everyone's there just to kind of grow in the experience themselves. And it's a life journey in the sense that there's not like cool, I've completed yoga, ticks, I've got my yoga participant qualification, and I guess that's all I can do. It's not even about that. It's just about cultivating your enjoyment and creating a passion in it, and kind of seeing your body, how it responds, and how your body actually really enjoys the experience. And
Yeah.
it's like a body mind connection, right? It's like you do it, you feel good, and then your body feels really good, and there's kind of this something about it that I think really draws people in.
Yeah. In fact, I like the whole body mind connection. And if you've been listening to this podcast enough, you know that I'm all about body mind emotional connection, all the like being this whole connectivity. And yoga is perfect for this because the origins of yoga are all about the Sanskrit itself for yoga was all about connecting the body with the divine. The oldest references we have to yoga were from the 5th or 4th century BC. And it talks about how yoga is this practice of connecting your mind, body, and spirit with the divine. And just having this complete holistic, so yoga was more of a holistic practice rather than this exercise. In fact, yoga as an exercise is kind of contemporary. Within the last about 100 years ago is when some of the yogis came to, I think it was Sweden, to present because the Kingdom of Sweden wanted a program for general exercise that anyone could get into. Like you said, right? Yoga is very accessible for everyone. You don't need any equipment. You just use your body weight and you just do stretches, but also flows and movement. And so that is what it was that outreach, that intention of creating this accessible workout that created this idea of yoga as a merely physical exercise.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually very interesting that they took it on. Yeah, it's the typical. I know it's appropriation, but it is taking sort of the what you see from a distance of something
Yeah.
and just pulling it in and making that the thing itself. But yeah, but I think almost part of that goes into meditation as a practice, which is more maybe focused on the mind. But then yoga kind of adds to that or differentiates to that in the way it takes the body. It's about movements and poses and a bit of strength and concentration, right? With
Mm-hmm.
meditation, there's concentration of controlling thought, but yoga, there's an extension of that where it's also controlling your movements and your breathing when it's not in the ideal conditions, almost to control it. There's a bit of heart rate, a bit of this, that, a bit of sweat, and yeah. But it is interesting how that it sort of got pulled into that environment.
Yeah, yoga and meditation actually kind of developed, or seated meditations that we know of, developed in a kind of similar environment and similar time frame too. They're both around that period that they were developed as a practice. And so, I view yoga as a moving meditation, whereas most people view meditation as just a seated meditation. Vipassana is what people normally know of as meditation, where you're just sitting and concentrating on your breath. But yoga is actually very similar to that because you still have to focus on your breath. In fact, some teachers believe that some yoga teachings say that the breath is the most important aspect of yoga. It's not like how many back bends you can do or what not crazy knots you can do, but you let your breath be your guide. Like if you can do small, like steady, calm breaths the whole way through, then you are doing your body is accepting the practice and accepting the gifts of the stretches and the movements.
Yeah. There's this, I think, principle that comes out in yoga, and maybe is what it adds in a way, is the idea of flow. Flow is basically this synchronicity between the mind and your movements at a sort of a high level. So when you require that absolute focus, and because the challenge that's there, and that kind of creates a state, and hence the flow, and
Mm-hmm.
that almost creates a different chemical process in the brain that's very enjoyable. But flow generally doesn't happen at low level activity. So if it's very easy and stuff, you're not going to get into flow. But if you're doing this kind of more challenging, more physical thing, but also there's a mental aspect, concentration, breathing, and just, controlling your body, that intensity, or at least a number of things involves, will, create, like, essentially, like, flow is literally like activated, and it's a very pleasurable, very rewarding in terms of chemical, and flow can be extended to other things. So, like, in studies of flow, even in working environments, people who, like, maybe do tasks that, don't seem very interesting, but maybe are actually, if you triggers a state of flow, there's a maybe enjoyment and a great benefit of it. I think in rock climbing, I get a strong sense of flow, because this is a concentration, it's self-trust, and there's little room for error. And if you think about it, you're doing hard work, you're doing labor, so why is it enjoyable, right? It's
Yeah.
it's just it's a different type of labor.
So yeah, so we're back a little bit of technical issues, but we flow, right?
Yeah.
So, uh, you mentioned how when you're rock climbing and like doing other things, you get into this like flow state. How do you experience this flow state? Like, how does it feel for you?
It's I think there's it's interesting because there's an intensity, but there's also almost a calmness of it as well. It's it ju- there's something so unique about it and so cool. It's just like not worrying about anything. You're blurring out the outside world,
Mm-hmm.
and the even the senses of the implications of feeling pain, and or what's on your mind. It all just blurs out, and to this singular task, this kind of singular purpose, that your body almost goes to, like, like 110%. Everything's firing in sync, working as a cohesive unit. And it's maybe even empowering to feel like, just being able to work this effectively, and do these things, but also just doing it is, I think it's almost truly enjoying the activity and the moment, purely for the skill itself, just exercising it. And it's not about like the reward at the end, or the looking forward to the endorphins and stuff. It's purely just, I think, really appreciating what you're doing for what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and just taking, like, pride and enjoyment of executing something that's takes a bit more than and almost prove something to yourself. It's like, wow, I can do this thing, but it
Yeah.
requires something.
Yeah. So it's like you're less focused on the destination. You're more focused on you're appreciating the journey.
Yeah, as like a comparison to ideas usually expressed on mindfulness, where it's about appreciating what you're doing in the current moment. And you can almost see it as that in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because everything else is blurred out. It's Even though it's not this kind of tip meditation in the sense of concentrating on your thoughts, but it's almost concentrating on the thoughts directly linked to the activity itself, and thoughts, to the movements and feeling your body, understanding and having just that absolute awareness. And so maybe it could be seen as a type of meditative thing, but it's definitely a very interesting thing. And both scientific literature and also my personal experience, I recommend find flow states out there in the world. Find a activity that takes a high level of skill and effort, for you where you are, in yourself, something that gives that challenge and requires that focus. You can't climb a mountain, like half focusing on your phone, right?
Yeah.
Being an advanced pose, it's you're going to be wobbling a bit if you like staring all over the room. You might have to focus on a spot.
Or even
So
if your mind, like sometimes if you're thinking about other things, like that can throw off your balance. It can get you out of
yeah,
this flow.
it's the ultimate being in the moment, uh, and I think that's kind of a really nice thing. It's
Yeah.
amazing what just being in the kind of the moment, and like I think it's like realizing that like not every maybe fulfilling thought and enjoyment is like this whole almost admiring the long run. Some of it's just about really doing something well that's meaningful and just enjoyable.
Yeah, and in some ways it's like more powerful cuz like you hearing you describe this flow state and hearing other people talk about these benefits of like it's like truly being in the present. And it fills you with, at least when I get into this state, like when I'm doing yoga or something similar, or like paddleboarding, I just feel like this euphoria, like a harmony, that everything within my whole system, my mind, my feelings, my body, are all aligned around the same goal and doing the same thing, and like all in sync. And it's like it's harmony.
Yeah, it's almost, and it's kind of like in the moment, almost a good sense of purpose. It's like, just do this, you know. Actually, I want to actually mention at this point, since it's my, I don't want to make it a focus, but just out of interest, my hobby slash uh, professional pursuit, the fire dancing and the LED dancing now, which is new.
The LED,
That
what is the LED dancing?
Well, it's kind of the same. I mean, but it's with lights. So that you
Oh.
can do indoor venues. So, for instance, I'm getting hired by like big party type thing. So, like there's a big DJ, there's a floor of dancers. Everyone's going crazy and wild, and then we have like stages at the front, depending on the venue, and
Yeah.
we're up there just playing with our LED toys. When it's the poi or like a LED staff with like flashing lights on either end, and the lights make like beautiful patterns, and they can be even trippy to the people going for that trippier sort of
Oh,
vibe.
that's so fun.
Um, and they're very intelligent now. Like as you sway the lights, like the accelerometer will change the lighting accordingly.
Ooh.
And if you look at photography, like I mean, like maybe we can share some somewhere, but like it creates very unique photography. Like just light moving in multiple colors, very fast in very distinct patterns. Even to someone who's watching, it's kind of cool. So in its own way, it's a nice thing. And where I'm getting with this though is that that's all the flow arts, right? And so the flow arts is the same idea. It's taking it's triggering the flow state through a movement practice that has an intensity and a high skill barrier to it. And to add the extra layer, when you add fire, there's even more flow because then you add a bit of stakes and to something that's already high skill and high focus. And so yeah, it's just an example of that activity is almost designed to trigger flow state, which is kind of where the name kind of developed. But you can find the flow state in every area of of hobbies and enjoyment. Or yeah, there's a lot of ways to find it, but I think it's really valuable to find things that trigger that in you and just give you pleasure for what you're doing.
what is an unexpected way that you've triggered your flow state?
An unexpected way.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like maybe in a hobby or doing something that you're like you did not would not initially have expected to like be a flow, but just kind of triggered a flow.
Hmm. So I think, although one part of it is that there's a bit of intention, like you do the challenge because you want to do the challenge. So in that sense, a lot of it is proactive sort of choice. I can think of an example though. Funny enough, so I'm a software developer, as you may know,
Hmm.
and basically when I get deep into code, there's a certain intensity of this kind of emergence of creativity and problem solving at a very like high level where there's lots of things to track and a lot of broader concepts stacked on more technical things. And so this problems, and there's a lot to juggle because if you make forget one thing, or you make one misstep, or you make one flawed choice in your process, there's a lot of repercussions. Now you're going to be fixing it and having to almost sometimes tear it up from scratch if enough went wrong. So there's that stakes and that level of problem and that expertise. This is doesn't involve the physical though, which is its own, which really enhances flow. But I did find in this maybe mental sort of activity, I could blow out for hours.
But
I'm doing
it
it, and
kind of,
it's
I mean, there
to
kind of is
people.
a physical in a way. Even if you're not like moving, you're still like, I mean, you're not moving your whole body, but you're still moving your fingers.
Yeah, but I think it definitely has an effect in its own way. But it's not traditional ideas of flow, but it is in its own way a type. Like I can, people who can like almost, you know, prod me with a kettle prod or something, and you won't get me to budge because, you know, the reason I thought of it as like a flow and experience this way is that everything else just blurs out because of the level of concentration I need in this moment. And I can be doing this for hours. I can do like 4 hours in a flow state, with no other thoughts besides what I'm doing in that moment, and it's actually really enjoyable. And on an activity that maybe doesn't sound so flashy, typing numbers and doing mathy things and maybe designy things,
Hmm.
but when you're in that flow state, it's cool. It's like there's a bit of magic there. Sometimes I think, what I do software development is kind of like, is it bland? Kind of sounds bland at some level. And sometimes I am like doing like writing documentation or certain aspects of it, and I'm like, what am I doing? This doesn't seem so exciting and thrilling. But when you're in that flow state, deep in the code, it can be very rewarding. And actually, I found like no other academic field did that for me. In the
Hmm.
moment, having total flow state in just thinking, in the academic fields, and that's why I think like in terms of this type of a non-physical career, it suited me. I think because of that.
But do you get that level of harmony across all of your aspects? Because, like, yeah, maybe it's like you mentioned, like it's really gratifying for you because you're thinking a lot. But yeah, maybe like, but you're not moving too much, and you're like not feeling so much because it's a very highly analytical area.
Yes.
So would you
So
say is it a similar flow to what you feel when you're doing like your fire dancing or the poi dancing?
similar, but also different. They, I don't know. They both can be really enjoyable, but I do find that the level of flow I can get in the fire spinning is like in its own sort of category. The but maybe it's the movement enjoyment. But I think just being in that state of like just getting something done so like effectively, and just it's not even about the outcome. It's just kind of enjoying that like everything kind of connected in your mind. Everything's just all your thoughts and what you're typing, and it's all just coming together. And with the movement, it takes that to another tier because now it's like controlling your body. And I also think the energy aspect kind of adds to it.
Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, there's different ways to find flow, but I think there is an elevation in the physical, but you can get it elsewhere for sure.
That makes sense. So okay, so we're kind of like identifying different types of flow or different types of like these states, right? The more rigorously mental is its own kind of flow, but like the physical with the mental is its own kind of flow. Um, and now I want to like step back a bit and look at the more like a bigger picture. Like people say like in life we should go with the flow, right? Like that's a very common thing. Uh,
Yes.
what does go with the flow mean to you?
So go with the flow is almost a contradictory statement in a way, isn't it? Because going with the flow in the flow arts, or the mental flow state, is about precision, focus, and you know really in the moment what you're doing, and there's an intention there. But when you go with the flow as a person, you almost, maybe it's signifying you're going with the flow of the collective. But for on an individual level, I mean, there's not, it's flow because you're just doing whatever. There's no intention, just whatever's happening around you, you go with. There's not a skill aspect or a deep motivation. It's basically just saying, don't exercise intention, just whatever happens happens. And there's an aspect of, sure, don't stress, but and just kind of be happy aspect. But it is a detraction from maybe uh, intention. But and it also maybe takes away. So go with the flow would also, in socially individual, be like, just accept. And maybe there's good accept ideas in accepting, but it it also means that don't stick to your ideals and your thoughts. Move away from that and just whatever's thrown at you to accept. If this is the principle that your friends are doing, they're like, that's a good idea. Well, now it's a good idea. I don't think you're taking moments to pause when you're going with the flow, to reflect, to understand, and to exercise intention. And that self-awareness isn't there, I think. It's almost moving away from self-awareness and more focusing on what you're doing, as opposed to how does that make you feel.
Why so there's a theme of like unintentionality. Why do you feel like going with the flow is unintentional?
I think of it like just in the typical like social context, right? So go with the flow might be, I have all these ambitions and things or whatever, or but do what your friends say, kind of, or join the activity your friends enjoy, or buy the thing that the media tells you to buy, or um, what you see is what you do. I think it almost detracts maybe from away from awareness, but it can be helpful in certain senses, like when you have problematic things. So you're overthinking things, or there's a lot of worry, or there's overwhelming uncertainty. Maybe it is a way to just say, let's just um, put that on hold and just go through some motions of life, and maybe build a bit of perspective. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of, I suppose, my thoughts on it.
I guess so. Here's some of my thoughts on go with the flow. So, um, I don't think it necessarily means like for me, it doesn't mean like do what everyone is telling you to do, because that is not that I don't think is the flow. I think the flow is more like let's use the analogy that we used uh, early on in this episode, the river, right? You're like that river in Thailand, very fast moving. Like you can choose how you want to live in it. Life is much like that, right? Like reality, life is full of uncertainty, full of things we can't control. And for me, going with the flow is partly accepting that a lot of what happens in our lives is without control. But I think there that what the you we have still intentionality because we can choose what to do. We can choose to swim upriver like you did.
Yeah.
You can expend a lot of energy to try to swim upriver, but sometimes the flow is too strong and you're just wearing yourself out. What if instead you waited for a point where the river slowed down? Or maybe you want to like get to shore and but swimming upstream isn't going to help, so you swim more diagonally. You like recognize the flow of life. And here's an example like stepping out of this analogy. Let's say that you want to let's say you want to like you have kids, right? And like let's say you have kids and you want to suddenly like quit your job, and like you have this real desire to like quit your job and just do nothing or whatever. Well, unfortunately, the flow of life is saying like, well, maybe you need some stability for your kids, but maybe like you can recognize that and say, oh, well, maybe I don't need to work this corporate job. Maybe I can do something else to provide stability for my children while still fulfilling my needs. Maybe I can't like go party every night anymore, but maybe I can still have a good time with my friends now and then and fulfill my needs that way while recognizing that life is changing around me. And finding this, so for me, go with the flow means harmonizing yourself with the world around us and with life itself, with uncertainty.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there is a good value in, I suppose, what happens to you, let that come into your thought process of your expectations. I think maybe this is a an example of moving away from expectations and more towards what's right in the moment. So, instead of saying, this is how life should be, and this is the things I should do and value, and this is the thing that if I don't get it, this is the path I go on, and that maybe is a scary thing to you, and saying, sure, there's things that are important to me, sure, there's things that I strive for, but let's live out, one day at a time. And maybe you realize that there's other things that are important to you. Maybe you realize that what you currently want is maybe just, part of a bigger story. Or
Yeah.
I think it's a learning journey, right? Looking at the perspective of you've solved life and, everything you should pursue and do and even think, is there. I mean, I don't think we have to think in this like perfect way. We have ideas of the world now, and sure, you should research and plan and try to have a good opinion, or just have good insight in making decisions, or just, choosing what to do. But at the same time, it's fine to kind of not be perfect or not do something in the most final form, and just acknowledge that you're part of a process that is enjoyable in itself and valuable in itself. And in this kind of, thing that's growing, this process that you're building in life, there's a lot of value and enjoyment along the way before you reach these things or don't reach these things, which maybe that's a better outcome because you find other things to reach or not reach.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just happy where you are.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of really good things. I liked how you put it that maybe it's about the expectations and living with fewer expectations. Because what's an expectation but like a prediction on what life should be like versus accepting how it is?
Yeah.
Like you can expect that like tomorrow is going to be 100, like is going to be a nice beautiful day, and then what happens if it rains? Are you going to yell at the clouds for raining on you?
Maybe go outside and see what rain has to offer. Maybe
Yeah.
you realize that maybe it's kind of beautiful in its own way. Maybe the kind of the rain going on you is like calming and therapeutic. And maybe you go sing in the rain. Maybe you have a bit of fun. Maybe don't stress about whether your clothes are going to get wet, and you know, uh, like how it's just this bad thing that's there almost to take away the thing you wanted. That you don't always have to have sun. Let's sometimes this rains. Maybe see what rain's like. Maybe see what you can find there. And
Yeah,
if you
maybe you
still
can,
really hate rain, then there's other things to do. Find ways to enjoy the indoors. But yeah, this is more of a metaphor than.
and maybe you can find your flow in the rain too.
Yeah, it's funny how we sometimes fear things, and when that thing becomes a reality, we just acknowledge, well, that's just a new, I suppose, location or area to us. It's a new experience, and maybe what that experience really entails or what we can get out of it is nothing like we expected. And
Hmm.
it's kind of closing yourself off if you have this things where I can only find good in these areas, I can only find bad in these areas without actually ever visiting those areas. This is not advice to be like do all the bad things, but more when the bad things around you and unavoidable, maybe see or the conceived bad things like the life you didn't expect or the people you didn't expect. Maybe give it a chance and see what it's like to really absorb and embrace even, or there's a lot of value in the world that we don't see at face value, and until we and you may never see it. You might just it might walk right directly towards you, and you might be looking towards the sky and never see it come past unless you know you use awareness and just slow down and see what's around you.
Yeah. And how can we hope to ever see what's in front of us if our gaze is always in the future? If we're always looking for our expectations, or if our gaze is always in the past, looking at what happened in the past. We have to like live in the moment we have now, in the life we have now.
Yeah, I'd almost give it like a challenge. If you can find ways that are almost the things you didn't expect that life would be about. There's something kind of almost, I don't know if it feels like a progression or a self growth or a level of insight developed. I'm thinking in school, people used to, this is kind of specific example, but used to do like live action role playing, and
Oh yeah.
these ideas that these are almost awful, uninteresting people. What they're doing is unenjoyable and unmeaningful, and time wasting of sorts. And had these ideals for so long, and I wouldn't even you wouldn't even go near the people or the events, you'd steer clear. And then later on, by coincidence, or maybe someone pulling on your shirt a bit to give you a bit of a kick, like, hey, try it out, meet some of the people. You realize people are people. Sure, they've got things they enjoy, but they've also got very unique stories with very unique insights. These are people that have maybe lived life journeys that you've never experienced, and that can be so much an offer to learn from that.
Yeah.
And you find why they're passionate about it, why they're into it. And it's this beautiful community of very, sometimes very kind of unique, kind of, that flourishes. It's very supportive, and the activity itself is very interesting, empowering, and almost liberating. It's like living a different life. And there's a coolness in the fact that I thought, that's off limits. Why would I ever have that in my life? And then it was thrown into my life, and I gave it a chance. I said, okay, people seem a bit odd. Let's chat to them. This activity seems a bit odd. Let's give it a go. Let's dress up a bit, and let's get into it. And you know, it's like, even if I'm not into it, let's at least make the effort while I'm here. And it paid off so much. Now it's like its own passion. And I've met beautiful community of people who have been drawn to it for, I think, very, maybe even deep reasons. And it's, yeah, there's beauty all over.
There's beauty all over. I 100% agree. I think that's a beautiful example of when we live without expectations, we get to see the world as it is rather than how we think it should be. And the world as it is can be a place of beauty. You can find beauty in the worst places, or what you'd think are the worst places.
Yeah. I guess the key there is like what you think exactly. It's the, you know, I sometimes tell people that if I look at my past self, my younger self, and I look at some of the things I'm into, I would be shocked. I'd be like, at that stage, I'm like, no, those things are awful. That's so lame. That's uncool. That's unrewarding. That's unmeaningful. Those are bad crowds or whatever. And quite a few things in my life, I ended up getting into these things, and I'd be like, my younger self would have been my ultimate critic. But what I also learned is that my younger self didn't realize how happy I would be in all these other things.
Yeah.
So that's like the level of happiness I reached in the things that I was so prejudiced against, like, is exceeded my expectations. So it's funny. Like, my idea of what kind of happiness is was almost under par in both where to get it and what it could be. And yeah, so maybe ultimate critic, but maybe also maybe someone to look up to my younger self.
Well, was it
The other
under
way around, my
par?
younger self look up to me because of that I actually found happiness in these things.
Do you think it was under par, or do you think it was rather that your version of happiness was good for you at that point, but then changed?
Yeah, I think now just imagining the ideas of what it meant to be happy and what it meant to be fulfilled and the things worth pursuing and the people worth surrounding myself with, they I think about that person now, I would be a bit underwhelmed. It's a hindsight thing, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't know, when you don't know different, you don't know different. So there's no comparison. But knowing like where I am now versus this kind of alternate, I suppose timeline or path, being that kind of person, I just don't think it doesn't feel like the same level of fulfilling. Everything tastes a bit sweeter and enjoyable. It feels like the sun shines a bit better, and it feels like I have better insights into things. I understand more why those things aren't actually br- bringing me the same kind of happiness. I understand what really brings me happiness more so, and I think that insight kind of just makes me think that my younger self like saw what they saw, but they saw uh, like a piece of the picture. In fact, all the best parts of the picture were hidden.
And you're
And
still seeing only a piece of that picture too. We're all
exactly.
it sounds like you've been going with the flow, and your flow has changed over time, and it will probably change more. And that's but the whole like so going back to going with the flow, and even though all this wrapping up all of these topics on like flow states and yoga and dancing and coding, and I think a key aspect of this of being in this flow state is harmony within your mind, harmony between your mind and your body, harmony between you and how you and the world around you. And even with yourself and like expectations of yourself.
No, I mean, I suppose harmony is partly, letting go of those expectations, partly just being in balance with the different aspects of yourself and even your surroundings. And everything's just, it's, it's not about it being like, like the top of the ladder of expectations, but it's also not down there. It's kind of in like not the best place, but the right place. I think
Yeah,
everything just being there,
the
that
right
feeling of
place.
this is right as opposed
Yeah.
to this is best.
And ultimately, what does it matter what's best or worst? Because what we're looking for is what's right for us.
Yeah. So no, I think this is a good wisdom in finding harmony in yourself, and just it's finding that balance that really works for you, right? It's like the ultimate form of a balance, and maybe mental what a like mental state is really kind of valuable to you in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Stephen, I know it's getting late where you are, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to say to our audience before we sign out?
I
Oh,
would say
there you go.
on the yoga, try it, give it a go. I was I was very pessimistic. In fact, I was initially anti it.
Oh, really?
Then I was kind of just like, it's probably a thing. Yeah, it just, I mean, this is going, back. Like, it just it didn't seem something that I could justify why people did it. And then later on, I said, okay, cool. I kind of get it. I can kind of see the sense, but not for me. And the next step was trying it out. And then, yeah, and then realizing, well, like enjoying it, but then also realizing after doing it a while, the impact it had on me. And once I had tangibly felt that impact, I was just like, yeah, let's keep this going. This is good for me. I feel refreshed. I feel, more peaceful and even more focused. It's like it's just jumpstarts your day, and then that jumpstarts your week, and there's kind of cool momentum about it. And if every other space in your life is chaos or troubling or not where you want to be, you at least have this space that's all for you. That's always going to be there to support you and for you to enjoy. And it only gets better and better in a world where maybe everything else is chaos and flames. You've got this little nugget of joy and maybe even purpose to go with. I think, yeah, and extending that to meditation itself. It's just another way to almost explore yourself, find out more about yourself, find out what works for you, what's really behind your thoughts, and what's behind what makes you click, and what's out there. It's these are untapped worlds, but I mean, as sort of mentioned, try out the things that you never thought you'd get into. Give the people around you that you show no interest in necessarily, a chance. See what's there. Say that well, while I'm here, let's give it my all. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. But I found great joy in it, and I have felt many benefits and many insights that I'm gonna hold on to. And so yeah, it's a whole world, guys. Mindfulness, yoga, self awareness, reflective. It's this cool little world that a lot of people don't know that much about. Even if you know knowledge wise a lot about it, knowing the real experience of what it is and the meaning behind it takes a bit of a journey into it. And so as the live action role playing stuff was this little scary mystery box that I didn't understand, I didn't realize I didn't understand, this may be one of those for you. So yeah.
I agree. Beautiful words. I highly recommend trying it out, yoga out. Anyway, thank you again, Stephen, for coming. This is really great. I always love chatting with you. Thank you for listening. Please check out The Power of Perspective with Stephen Ritchie, and check out our podcast information on Instagram. Like and share the podcast. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness. Thank you so much.